Hi, Risa here. Today in this video, I'm going to show you how to make chicken soup. Now, I basically follow the same recipe for most of my soups, and the difference is what I put in them and how I flavor them, but I usually start the same way. So I'm heating up my pot, and I am in my temporary place. We're in our condo. We're in transition from moving, so it's not my awesome kitchen that I had before. Right now I'm putting in some coconut oil. I just get this at Costco, and you want to make sure you get unrefined coconut oil, but I use it in my soups. You could also use olive oil. Coconut oil is a great saturated fat for you. It's super healthy. It has a high smoke point, and I just use it all the time in my cooking. So sometimes I'll use olive oil, sometimes I'll use coconut oil. And I don't really measure, I'm just sort of putting enough in so that it's going to coat the whole bottom, and I have a lot of vegetables so that all the vegetables will get nice and coated. And you can always add a little bit more later if you need to. So then I've got my carrots, sweet potatoes. I put sweet potatoes in pretty much all my soups. It just adds a really great flavor, so I highly recommend it. I have onion and I have garlic. So I'm just going to let my coconut oil melt, and then I'm going to add these in there. And I'm still not quite used to using this electric stovetop. I am used to gas, so I'm still trying to get the hang of exactly where I need to put the heat. So that's not too hot and it's not too cold. All right, so those are going to saute up for a little bit, and basically what you're doing is you're sort of sauteing, pre-cooking your vegetables a little bit, and that way your time for the soup to make the soup is going to be a lot shorter. Now, while that's in there sauteing a little bit, I'm going to add my spices. You can add whatever you want. I always add sage. I love sage, so I'm going to add that. And I'm pretty liberal with my spices. I add quite a bit because I just like all the flavors that it gives it. So don't be afraid to throw some spice in there. So that's my sage, and then I always add thyme. I love thyme, so I add a lot of thyme, and I crunch it up in my fingers when I add it so that you really get the flavor comes out. And again, I add quite a bit of spice, so don't be afraid of the spices. And then I'm going to add some oregano, and I do the same thing with that. I just crunch that up. And I've got some rosemary. I don't add quite as much rosemary because that's a really strong flavor. So I don't have as much of that. And I've got my Himalayan salt. So I'm going to add some Himalayan salt. And then I'll just throw in some pepper. And I normally have a pepper grinder, but we're in transition, so I don't quite have that. And it's smelling really good, so if you can see it. So I also have my chicken roasting in the oven, and if I had a great camera video crew, I would show it to you, but it's roasting in the oven, and what I'm going to do is once it's roasted and it cools down just a little bit, I'll pull the chicken off and I'll add it to the soup. Because it's already cooked, so I can add that in last. So we're just gonna let that hang out. I'm gonna let it hang out until it's, let's see, the sweet potatoes get softer first than the carrots. So maybe sort of when the sweet potatoes start softening up, then I will add the broth, and then I will add my lentils. So I have some lentils that they're just dry lentils, and all I did was rinse them off and wash them off really well. And I will add that to the soup. Then I'm going to add my chicken broth. So be really careful when you're buying chicken broth, because this is not a homemade chicken soup with homemade broth. We do make that sometimes, so I will save my chicken carcass to do homemade stock, but that's a whole other video. So oftentimes I end up buying broth. Well, when you buy broth, you really want to check the ingredients because they're now adding sugar to like everything that you buy. And I used to buy a different brand, and I swear it didn't have sugar in it because I always read my ingredients, and I think they changed it because sometimes they do that. They change the ingredients that they're putting in. So this one is organic. It's free range organic. It's Imagine is the brand. And if you read all the ingredients, it's organic chicken broth, organic onions. So it does have natural chicken flavoring. Not exactly sure what that means, but it's the best thing that I could find. So whatever you can find, just try to buy something that doesn't have sugar because your chicken broth doesn't need sugar in it. And if you can make your own, that's always the best. We normally will make chicken stock. So, because I'll save the carcass and then we save a couple and we make some chicken stock and then we make chicken soup from that immediately. Now some people will make the stock and they save it in their freezer in little containers. So when I moved back into our new house, I'm gonna have to try to do that. See if I can just make chicken stock periodically. Because we roast a chicken probably like once a week at least, or once every other week. Because it's just easy. It's an easy thing to do. So the onions are starting to get cooked, and the sweet potatoes and carrots are going to take a little bit more time, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can go ahead and add your broth whenever you want to. I just usually kind of cook it up a little bit more because that way the soup will come together a lot quicker. So what I'm going to then do is I will add the lentils, I'll add the stock, and then later, once everything is cooked, so once my lentils are cooked, I'm actually going to add black beans. And towards the end, I add zucchini. So you can add whatever you want. You can put mushrooms in it, whatever floats your boat. You can put butternut squash in it. I just didn't have any. Whatever you want to put in your soup. I like a thick soup, so I tend to put lots of veggies in it, whatever I can think of. And then sometimes I'll add rice, so cooked brown rice, or you can add some pasta in there if you want, like orzo pasta. My husband loves orzo pasta, so you can add that in there. Or you can make quinoa, and you can just put some quinoa in your bowl and then put your soup on top of that. That also works. So whatever works for you. So it smells really good. All the spices are in there, and it's just cooking up. It smells delightful. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and add my lentils. And I don't know how much this is. I just kind of eyeball it. Sometimes I add, more than other times. So don't be afraid. Don't think you have to measure everything. Just throw it in the pot. It's all gonna come out great. And so I'm just gonna stir those up a little bit. And then shake up my broth. And I'm going to add my broth. And I will add at least 2 of these containers. So these are 32 fluid ounces, so 64 fluid ounces. Because I always like to make a lot of soup because we will eat this for several meals, and then I'll freeze the rest of it. So then that way, on those days that you just don't feel like cooking, you can pull out your soup and you can have it with a salad. And it makes for a really easy dinner. So big thing is make sure you check your ingredients. Read those ingredient lists and try to buy the best ingredients that you can. Super important because you'll really notice it. You want to make sure you're buying, quality ingredients. It really matters what you're putting in your body. So I'll also turn my heat up a little bit because I want this to come to a simmer. So just a really light boil, and then I'm going to cook this until the lentils are cooked and the sweet potatoes and the carrots are soft. And then when my chicken is done, I'm going to add my chicken to it. I'm going to add some black beans, and I'm going to add the squash. Also, when I have kale or I have any other greens like collard greens, mustard greens, whatever greens I have, I will basically put that in right before I serve it. So I just really put up the greens in and they just kind of wilt. So they maybe are in there for maybe 15 minutes. and then I'll just serve it. So that's another good way to get your greens in there, because if you don't like greens, you're really not going to taste them in the soup. You're just going to have the flavor of the soup, but you're still going to get the health benefits of the greens. So I hope this has been helpful. This is how I always make my soups. It's really not that hard. I just chop all my veggies up like that. So that's all there is to it, to making soup. It does not have to be hard, so don't make it a hard process. Now, I make the majority of my soups just like this, and sometimes I'll add chicken. I've also added ground turkey. I've made little mini meatballs, and I've done it with ground meat, or sometimes I've just browned the ground meat or ground turkey and then just added that in. So it's very versatile. You can do a lot with it. You can also change your spices and have different spices, so it just changes the soup. But it's basically the same thing that I do, the same recipe that I make. I hope this has been helpful. As you can see, making chicken soup is really not that hard. And even making chicken stock isn't that as hard as like I used to think it was. So if this has been helpful, don't forget to share it with your friends, and please leave me a comment below because I love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me.